July 12, 2025. Washington is reeling from President Trump's latest legislative triumph, the One Big Beautiful Bill. In a city accustomed to political drama, this sweeping piece of legislation has sent shockwaves through the halls of power and across the nation. The bill, which has been months in the making, is being hailed by its supporters as a historic achievement and a turning point for the country. This sweeping overhaul cements the 2017 tax cuts, making them permanent for individuals and businesses, and introduces a new wave of relief measures aimed at stimulating economic growth. At the same time, it slashes spending on social safety nets, including major reductions to programs that millions of Americans rely on. The bill's supporters argue that these changes will unleash innovation, create jobs, and put more money back into the pockets of hardworking families and entrepreneurs. Among its most talked-about provisions, the bill expands the child tax credit, offering additional support to families with young children. It also adds new deductions for seniors and working Americans, promising some relief for those on fixed incomes or struggling to make ends meet. However, these benefits come at a cost. The legislation deeply cuts funding for healthcare and food assistance programs, leaving low-income families and vulnerable populations facing an uncertain future. Critics warn that these cuts could push millions closer to the edge, straining community resources and safety nets. President Trump is touting the bill as a fix for everything from border security to economic growth, promising that it will restore American greatness and put the country back on the right track. He claims the bill will strengthen the economy, secure the borders, and make the United States more competitive on the world stage. Yet, as the news spreads, Americans from all walks of life are tuning in, eager and anxious to see how these sweeping changes will affect their daily lives. The legislation's mix of tax breaks and spending cuts has ignited fierce debate across the country. Lawmakers are clashing in Congress, with some hailing the bill as a long-overdue reform, and others condemning it as a threat to the nation's most vulnerable. Outside, protesters gather, demanding answers and voicing their fears. On television and online, commentators and citizens alike are locked in heated arguments over who truly benefits from the bill and who is being left behind. It's a bold gamble, betting that tax cuts and a smaller government will drive prosperity and opportunity for all. Supporters believe that by reducing government intervention and empowering individuals, the bill will spark a new era of growth. But as questions mount about the fate of those who depend on government support, many wonder if the nation is prepared for the consequences. The debate is not just about numbers on a page, but about the values and priorities that will shape America's future. As the nation unpacks the One Big Beautiful Bill, a political battle looms over the direction of America's future. The choices made today will echo for generations, as Americans grapple with what kind of country they want to be, and who will share in its promise. The new tax bill brings sweeping changes, locking in lower tax rates for both individuals and corporations. This means that across the board, people and businesses will see a reduction in the amount they owe to the IRS, at least for now. The intention, according to supporters, is to put more money back into the pockets of everyday Americans and stimulate economic growth by making it easier for companies to invest and hire. The bill also introduces targeted tax breaks for seniors, aiming to ease the financial pressures that come with retirement and fixed incomes. Families and workers are set to benefit as well, with new provisions designed to help those juggling household budgets and living paycheck to paycheck. For seniors, a brand new deduction is available, potentially lowering their taxable income and providing some much-needed relief. Residents of high-tax states like New York and California will see advantages from the expanded SALT cap, which allows them to deduct more of their state and local taxes from their federal returns. Workers in service and manufacturing jobs will notice new exemptions for tips and overtime pay, meaning more of their hard-earned money stays in their pockets. Families with children will receive a larger child tax credit, making it easier to cover the rising costs of childcare, education, and daily expenses. The bill also introduces Trump accounts, a new type of long-term savings vehicle, encouraging Americans to set aside money for the future, whether for retirement, education, or emergencies. For a limited time, there's a special deduction for auto loan interest, which could make buying a new car more affordable for many families. Plus, a new credit rewards those who donate to private school scholarship funds, potentially expanding educational opportunities for students across the country. However, not all benefits are universal. Some of the most generous provisions begin to phase out for higher earners, limiting their impact on the wealthiest individuals. Still, critics argue that the largest and most permanent gains are reserved for the wealthy and big corporations who see significant reductions in their tax burdens. They claim the bill's structure deepens income inequality, offering only modest relief to the majority of Americans while delivering substantial windfalls to those at the very top. For the ultra-wealthy, these changes could mean millions in savings, further widening the gap between rich and poor. The debate continues. Does this bill truly help the average American family, or does it risk widening the economic divide and fueling greater inequality for years to come? In a move that's sparking intense debate across the country, lawmakers have introduced a sweeping bill that promises significant tax cuts, but at a steep cost. These tax reductions are paired with some of the most substantial rollbacks to social programs in modern American history, igniting passionate responses from both supporters and critics. At the heart of these changes is Medicaid, the nation's largest public health insurance program. Over the next decade, Medicaid is set to lose a staggering $1 trillion in funding. This cut threatens the healthcare security of millions of low-income Americans, including children, people with disabilities, and the elderly who rely on Medicaid for essential medical services. According to the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office, these reductions could result in as many as 17 million people losing their health coverage. Hospitals and clinics serving vulnerable populations may face overwhelming demand, longer wait times, and reduced resources, further straining an already burdened healthcare system. The bill also targets SNAP, commonly known as food stamps, with deep funding cuts. This move puts food security at risk for millions of low-income families, children, and seniors who depend on this assistance to put meals on the table. Food banks and community organizations warn that demand for emergency food aid could surge as a result. Critics argue that these sweeping cuts will not only increase immediate hardship, such as hunger and homelessness, but also lead to long-term health problems and greater instability for the most vulnerable Americans. Families already struggling to make ends meet may find themselves with even fewer resources and support. The legislation also brings major changes to higher education. By capping federal student loan borrowing, the bill makes it harder for students from working-class backgrounds to afford college. Without family wealth, many may be forced to take on private loans with higher interest rates, or forego higher education altogether, limiting their future opportunities. On the other hand, the bill expands Pell Grants for workforce training programs, aiming to help more young adults gain practical skills for in-demand jobs. Supporters say this could strengthen the workforce and help close the skills gap, but critics worry it doesn't make up for the loss of broader educational access. Meanwhile, the elimination of clean energy tax credits marks a significant shift in environmental policy. Renewable energy projects may stall or shut down, threatening jobs in the green sector and slowing progress toward a cleaner, more sustainable future. Altogether, these changes represent a dramatic realignment of national priorities. The impacts will be felt across healthcare, nutrition, education, and the environment, touching nearly every aspect of American life, especially for those already facing hardship. Many argue that by weakening the social safety net, the bill risks pushing more Americans into poverty, reducing opportunities for advancement, and deepening inequality. As the nation debates its future, the question remains, who will bear the burden of these sweeping changes and what kind of society will emerge as a result? A major pillar of the bill is a $150 billion boost for immigration enforcement and deportation. Trump showcased new detention centers in Florida, framing them as essential to his crackdown on undocumented immigrants. The funding supports large-scale detention and removal operations, marking one of the biggest investments in immigration enforcement ever. Supporters see this as vital for national security and law enforcement. Critics, including immigrant rights groups, warn of family separations, community disruption, and human rights abuses. The new detention centers have drawn comparisons to internment camps, intensifying the national debate. The policy pits calls for law and order against demands for compassion and reform. Trump's promotion of the bill includes bold claims, like undocumented immigrants costing taxpayers $70,000 each per year, debunked by independent studies. He's also inflated migrant numbers and revived conspiracy theories, fueling a contentious media environment. On Medicaid cuts, Trump insists they target only waste and fraud, but nonpartisan analyses show millions could lose coverage. The gap between administration rhetoric and independent fact checks is stark. For Americans, sorting fact from spin is harder than ever. The debate is less about policy details and more about which narrative prevails. The stakes real-world consequences for millions. The bill's permanent tax cuts and new spending are projected to add $3 trillion to the national debt over the next decade. Critics warn this threatens long-term financial stability and burdens future generations. Supporters argue tax cuts will spur growth, but opponents say benefits flow mostly to the wealthy, while cuts hurt the poor. The repeal of clean energy tax credits could slow the shift to renewables, drawing fire from environmentalists and industry leaders. The bill's trade-offs: lower taxes and less regulation, but a weaker safety net and higher debt. The hope is for broad prosperity. The risk is greater inequality and fiscal strain. The economic consequences will shape America's future for years. The nation faces a high-stakes gamble on growth versus stability. The bill has sparked a fierce debate over Trump's MAGA populism. On the campaign trail, he promised to champion the working class and fight for forgotten Americans. Critics argue the bill's core, tax cuts for the wealthy, cuts to social programs, betrays those promises. Deep Medicaid and SNAP cuts hit many Trump voters hardest, fueling accusations of a populist charade. Some analysts say supporters may not realize the personal impact of these policies. The bill forces a national reckoning. Is MAGA about economic uplift for workers or just cultural and nationalist appeal? For now, the one big beautiful bill stands as a test of what populism really means in America.